I have a script tonight by the chairman of our committee, Judy Horan. Judy is sitting up here to my left. I'll probably thank her more than 3 times tonight, which would be 4 or more, but I will try to stick to the script as much as I can, Judy, but you know, I'm not a very good reader and I tend to wander, so I apologize up front if I don't tend to follow the script. But I will read some of what Judy was so kind to write for me. Good evening. Welcome to the 8th Annual Omaha Press Club Journalists of Excellence Hall of Fame. I'm Todd Murphy, Vice President of Universal Information Services and the current President of the Omaha Press Club, as my tag does say. So if anyone had doubts that if I should not be up here, I am anointed with this, well, anointed father or reverend, that's probably not the right word, but I have a badge. It means something, I assume. Tonight you'll hear stories of 7 exceptional journalists. Honorees' names will join others on the plaque in our Hall of Fame, our Hall of History, out in the, by the elevators where you came in tonight. So as you leave, you can certainly look at that and see others that were honored in years past. Also, as a member of the Marketing and Membership Committee, we have membership information by the elevators as you leave tonight. It's always appropriate for me to say that you don't need to be a member of the press to join the Omaha Press Club. So if you have a good time tonight and enjoy the evening, grab a little information on your way out. We'd love to have you as a member and see you here at future events. Back to the script. We do have sponsors. We want to thank our sponsors. Many of them are friends and members of the club. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska. Marcia Katie's on our board. I know, Marcia, where are you? Back there, the beautiful Marcia Katie, thank you. Hotel Deco 15 and the restaurant Heritage Food and Wine is also a sponsor. They're right over here on 15th and Harney. Marcotte Insurance. Nebraska Press Association Foundation. Raise your hand if you know Alan Bierman. See, now, everyone who raised their hand shouldn't have, because if you know Alan Bierman, you know you shouldn't claim that you know Alan Bierman. So now I know who to avoid at the after party. And finally, Nebraska Realty is also a sponsor. They were formerly Deeb Realty and just went through a new branding. So we want to thank our sponsors who kindly helped support the event. And here's where I wander a little bit. In addition to the generosity of our sponsors, there's several people that we have to thank that make these events possible. I just don't show up at 4:30 and set all the places for everybody and, you know, get the cameraman, you know, queued up and get the slides for John ready. There's other people who helped me. Actually, they did it all and I just came at 5. But Steve and Christine Villamonte. There's Christine in the back. Christine, I'm talking about you. Please wave. She's back by the bar, very busy. Steve is in the kitchen. They do an outstanding job running this club. So those who are members, you know how hard they work to make sure every event is outstanding. I also want to thank the other Omaha Press Club board members who are here tonight. I'm not going to make you stand up and I'm not going to call you out, but I do want to thank you for attending. And most of all, again, I want to thank Judy Horan, who worked literally 12 months to make sure that our honorees are appropriate and well vetted and the event comes together. Despite that, Gary Saddlemeyer still made it in. His name came up every year for 15 years, I was told. And finally, the people who knew him had all moved and somehow he got approved. So Gary, this is your year, buddy. Cheers to you. Right. Excellence in Journalism and Others, we'll call the award. Before we introduce the honorees, we're gonna have a little change in the program. We're going to first have a talk from a very special guest who agreed to come speak to us tonight. A gentleman I've gotten to know just briefly this week, but it's already like we have known each other for a long time. We both have some Big Ten roots, but also have some ties to the Huskers. So we'll have John Clifton, who's the managing director of the Gallup World Poll. He came here tonight from his office in Washington, D.C. to tell us how people are doing around the world in the United States and in Nebraska. After John's talk, we'll have dinner, and then we'll commence with the ceremony of inducting this year's honorees. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome John Clifton to the podium.
Good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be here. Todd mentioned that I am from Washington, D.C., but I was also born and raised right here in Lincoln, Nebraska, actually. So it's really an honor to be here at the Omaha Press Club. Todd, also thank you for having me, and thank you for your leadership with everything that you do. He asked a few people to raise their hands and ask if they knew who Alan Bierman is. Alan Bierman is actually the reason that I'm here this evening. He does a wonderful program with young people where he flies them out to Washington, D.C., and one of the stops that they make is Gallup. And during one of those stops, Alan and I got to know each other, and I did a short presentation for his group, and he said, whatever you did then, do that for the Omaha Press Club. So that's why I'm here tonight. And I know Alan's not here tonight, he's in San Diego, but I also wanted to just quickly thank him, not just for having me be here, but also to thank him for everything that he does for Nebraska. Now, after speaking with Alan, what he wanted me to present on is this initiative that we call the Gallup World Poll. And this is a massive undertaking where we go to 166 different countries on an ongoing basis and ask people how they're doing. And so what he wanted me to share with you tonight is just three things. The first is, what is it? The second is, what are we finding? And the third thing is, why did we start this? So I want to tell you one of my most favorite stories ever in the history of Gallup. It's why we started the Gallup World Poll. The story goes a little like this. Secretary Rumsfeld, almost 15 years ago, he was standing in front of the press corps, and this is at a time when he was very popular, according to the Gallup poll. That wasn't even meant to be a joke. Anyway, at one moment, Secretary Rumsfeld is talking about what's happening in Afghanistan, and somebody from the press says to him, Mr. Secretary, how do we know how people perceive us in Afghanistan? And again, we had just gone in. They said, are we perceived as aggressors or liberators? Now the secretary kind of shot back in a hostile way, and do you know what he said? He said, how would I have any idea what they're thinking? Do you think I can get a Gallup poll taken there? Here's the funny thing. Our chairman and CEO is actually watching that live. So he picked up the phone. He called a guy that's right here from Nebraska named Dr. Gail Muller. And he said, do you think we could do a survey in Afghanistan? Our CEO is a businessman. So when he called this top survey methodologist, I think he thought it was funny because he said, yeah, of course we can. We just need the money to pay for it. And so we went into Afghanistan, and we went into 8 other predominantly Islamic countries. Again, not just to find out about Afghanistan, how Afghans felt about us, but we also wanted to figure out about what happened with 9/11. By the way, we went in. If you remember at the time, many people in the Bush administration were saying, why do they hate us? Why do the terrorists hate us? Do you remember what the one thing they said was? They hate us for our freedom. When we went into 9 predominantly Islamic countries and we asked people, what is it that you respect and admire about America? We did this in an open-ended way, and I know some of you have a background in polling, so you know open-ended questions are very difficult to code. But we did it anyway. Do you know what the number one thing people in 9 predominantly Islamic countries said about the United States when we said, what is it that you respect about them the most, other than technology? Their freedom. Do you see the problem with that? So the more that their strategies are built on false assumptions, the harder the leadership works, the worse they make the world. So we went around and briefed a number of leaders. People like Queen Rania came to see us in Washington, D.C. And we started doing stakeholder interviews with these leaders because we said, if we're collecting information like this, what else would you want to know? And you know what they told us? They said, we wish we had another metric to understand how people are doing around the world. Right now we use things like GDP per capita. And the challenge with GDP is, of course, if someone builds a prison in the middle of a city, GDP increases. But it doesn't mean people's lives got better. And so what they wanted is a metric to understand, are people's lives getting better? So that's why we built the Gallup World Poll. And the Gallup World Poll stands for one thing, to quantify how people are doing in every corner of the planet. Now, you may say, so John, I think I know these surveys. They're happiness surveys. You ask them to rate their lives, and then the UN uses your data, and they come out once per year, and they find that the Danes are the happiest people in the world. And in fact, just recently, we probably all read that the Swiss we're the happiest people in the world. And you say, gee, John, that is so fun to consume. People share it on social media and they say my grandmother was Danish, so I know that they're the happiest people in the world. It's fun, but it's not something for policy. Well, that's all changed recently. And if I have a slide thing, I could click this really quickly.
His name's Wade.
Oh, Wade? So if you could just click Wade so I can show this graph, and just click twice for me, and just one more time. Because if we look back at Egypt, and by the way, this was true of Bahrain, this was true of Tunisia, in the lead up to the Arab Spring, GDP grew in almost a perfect linear fashion. You can see right there, 2011, January, as we know, is when the Arab Spring met Egypt. So if we looked at traditional economic indicators to understand how people's lives were going, that's what it would have told us. By the way, the Human Development Index put out by the UN shows exactly the same trend. There's a competitiveness index as well, put out by the World Economic Forum. Guess what country was 11th in the world in the lead up to in terms of gains in the lead up to the Arab Spring? Tunisia, in terms of competitiveness. And of course, a gentleman then burned himself on the streets, not because he was screaming for his God, but because he said, I just want to work. Again, this is what traditional economic indicators tell us. And if we could just move one more, this is what people said about their own lives. When we asked them to evaluate their lives on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being the worst possible life and 10 being the best possible life, now and in the future, we combine it for an index. We knew 29% of people were thriving in 2005. That collapsed to 9% in the lead up to the Arab Spring. That exact same trend was followed by Tunisia, and that exact same trend was followed by Bahrain. The only difference with Bahrain is that 44% of people 2 years prior to the Arab Spring were thriving, and it collapsed down to 11%. So for those that see happiness surveys and they look at them and they say this is fun to consume but not for policy, it's information like this that's changing the way that we think about it. So on the next slide you'll see, what is the Gallup World Poll? It's really made up of two things. One is this robust methodology that we do in 166 countries, but the other thing is, what is it that we're quantifying? So we went out and did a three-part process. One, we did a historical review of everything Dr. Gallup had ever asked over the past 80 years. In fact, there's a great interview with Edward Murrow about 50 years ago. He still has a cigarette in the video. I'm not very familiar with these videos, but I watched it. It's a black and white. And they flip on, and Edward Murrow has his cigarette, and he says, Mr. Gallup, he said, and they interview Dr. Gallup in his home. They go through his family, meet all of them. But at the very end, he says something so interesting. He says, Dr. Gallup, what is it that you're most interested in of all the things that you do? I thought Dr. Gallup was going to say election polling. I thought he might say approval ratings of presidents, maybe leaders around the world. It's not what he said. He said this information is what he was most interested in, asking how people were doing. So if you click to the next one, this is a summary. We did a historical review of what Dr. Gallup did. We did stakeholder interviews with anyone that would meet with us, including the UN, the State Department, anyone that would take a meeting. And then lastly, we brought in what we call Gallup Senior Advisors. So Danny Kahneman, of course, the behavioral economist, came in and told us things to ask. Former president of all economists, Angus Deaton, was one of them. Even our old, I say Senator Hagel, but Secretary Hagel is one of those individuals as well. And we just said, what is it that we should do and review our work? So they would come in and criticize the things we're doing, and then, of course, we would change it. We built this as a model for societies. At the foundation, you can see it says law and order, food and shelter, institutions and infrastructure, good jobs, well-being, brain gain, and then GDP per capita. I just want to quickly explain one on what we're doing here. At the very foundation, you can see it says law and order. If you do a gross oversimplification on how we quantify law and order around the world, it's two ways. One, how many people have been arrested? Think about that. If you hire more police and more people get arrested, crime does not go up. You see the challenge with that metric? And the other one is how many people have reported that they've been mugged or assaulted. I emphasize the word reported. You know, I lived in Washington, D.C. for almost a decade now. 10 years ago, if you lived in D.C. and you get mugged in Chinatown, you know what you do? Nothing. Because you don't think the cops are going to do anything about it. But you see the problem? So when you go in and count the numbers from the actual police precinct, you have a problem. because not everyone that's getting mugged is reporting it. So we did 3 things. One is we got the actuals. We asked people around the world, have you been mugged or assaulted? The other thing is, have you or a family member had money or property stolen over the past year? That's the actuals. The second thing that we do is a perception-related thing, which is whether or not they have confidence in their local police. And the last one is behavioral. Because when we asked the best leaders in the world on safety and security what it is they were trying to accomplish, do you know what they said? Because I thought what they were going to say was, I want to make people safe. But that's not what they said. They said, I want to make people feel safe. You see the challenge with that? Making people safe has one metric. Making people feel safe has another metric. So we quantified fear in every country. And we simply asked people, it works everywhere. It works in Nebraska. It works in Saudi Arabia. In the city or area where you live, do you feel safe walking alone at night? And it's one of the best barometers in the world for fear. So if you look at the next slide, how do we pull this off? We're in 166 countries. Methodology is key for us at Gallup. This is what we call a sampling frame. We go out into every single country in the world, at least the developing countries, and we break up the countries into what look like U.S. congressional districts. So the actual physical territory, it's broken up by population. Then within each of those, they're called primary sampling units, we interview 8 to 12 people. It's a very robust methodology, and as you can see there, those are all the places we go to interview people, not just Mexico City. We go all over Mexico. Same is true of every country. So if on the next slide, you'll see this is actually what it looks like. This is a woman interviewing another woman in Kyrgyzstan, asking her, evaluate your life on a scale of 0 to 10. Do you feel safe walking alone at night in the city or area where you live? The same questions she gets are the same questions that we ask Nebraskans. You'll see on the next slide, this one's Costa Rica, and on the last one is Madagascar. Again, anytime a photo is actually taken, we throw those out because having an American or a Russian in the presence of those photos could contaminate the data, so it's all done just for testing purposes. Just a few more graphs. Here's the next one. This right here, and if you click, that's where we are, and if you watch carefully, that's where we are not. We don't interview in North Korea. The thought of asking people, how's your life going in North Korea seems a bit ridiculous. The other one there is Papua New Guinea, and there are other smaller countries where it's really just a budget issue. Our dream is, of course, to get them all. On the next slide, you'll see this is Ukraine. So you might say, well, gee, maybe the Arab Spring countries were outliers. What did people say about their own lives in Ukraine? So if you just click, you can see GDP per capita. You can see how the economic meltdown affected Ukraine. And then when we asked people to evaluate their lives, this was the percentage of people that were thriving. You can see there was a 10-point decline in the lead up, and I left it at the 2013. It does statistically get worse but that was 6 months before Mainan. The next one, I've shown a lot of graphs on what countries aren't going well. If we remember very carefully, The Economist picked their country of the year last year. Did anyone follow that? So the country they said was their country of the year was Tunisia. You know, I've studied the data. I probably wouldn't have agreed with them. If there was one country, here's GDP per capita within Colombia. And then if we look at how people see their lives, well, that's the first one is how they see their lives. Upwards of 57% of people are thriving in Colombia. It makes them among the top 20 in the world for people that are thriving. That's a remarkable change over the past decade in Colombia. Here's another one. South Africa, if you want to get your futures on a country, anything you read, see, and hear about South Africa, those money transactions that are up there where it's growing in a perfect linear fashion, doesn't feel accurate. But when we ask people to evaluate their lives, it looks like this. But do you see the difference? Everything we read there, things aren't going well. Yet the money transactions tell us a different story. So I wanted to show you two last things. One is how people are doing in the United States. And again, money transactions, the economy, make an impact. There's GDP per capita. And here's how people see their lives. We are not quite back to where we were after the economic meltdown in terms of how people see their lives. We have one of the lowest rates of people that are suffering in the world. Now, where do we stack up? So if you look at the top 10 on the next slide, in terms of the United States, here are the countries with the highest thriving in the world. Again, the top 10 are who you know. Denmark, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, Canada, Finland. It's amazing the accuracy when you ask people, how are you doing? How accurate that information is. You'll see at the bottom, 12th out of the 150 countries where we went is the United States of America. Now I want to show you this too, because this is interesting, because we can see where Nebraska would fit on that list. But here's the highest suffering globally. Afghanistan at 61% is the highest percentage we have ever seen in the history of our tracking in terms of the percentage of people that are suffering. 61%. Haiti, you can see at 41%. Burundi, Bulgaria. Greece has completely collapsed after the economic situation there. And the last two things, so we said, how are people doing around the world? How are people doing in the U.S.? How are people doing in Nebraska? Now, GDP per capita data is not out for 2014, but I put that on there anyway. We all are probably familiar with this. Does anyone want to guess how we Nebraskans are doing? Here's the trend. We're doing really well. Now, there's a number of things that drive that, but you know, when you ask Nebraskans, it's amazing. I stayed at my sister's place. She just leaves the doors unlocked at night. Now that I've moved to Washington, we don't do that in Washington. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of people in the press here. Don't put that in the. She's here with me tonight. Okay, so how does Nebraska stack up with the rest of the states? So here are the top 10 states in terms of thriving. The samples that we use for this, we call them every single day, are upwards of 350,000, but you'll see that Alaskans evaluate their lives the best. Nebraskans are fourth, well, statistically tied with the Buffaloes. Now, you'll see that there's a slight methodological issue that we're experiencing with this. But Nebraska is at about 59%. So you might say, well, Nebraska is on par with the national average based on the slides that you just showed me. Not true. These would be higher if we were administering exactly the same methodology that we do in 166 countries. So you could argue, based on all the information that I showed you, that if you broke us out as a country, we would probably be among the top 10 in the world for people that are thriving. Here's the place with the lowest thriving in the United States. West Virginia, they've actually changed policy because of this. Because every time that we do this rankings, West Virginia is among the worst on all of how people see their lives. Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Those are my remarks. The last slide is my business card, just in case any of you are interested in any more information. But seriously, you know, this is, the issue of well-being seems like one of the most soft types of sciences that maybe Gallup has ever created. But I assure you one thing. 80 years ago, an economist named Simon Kuznets went to Congress with a new concept called GDP. And he said to Congress, this is a new way that you should quantify America's economy. And of course, today, we look at GDP, and it is a staple in terms of how we evaluate the leadership of this country, the leadership of our states. 80 years from now, that metric, GDP still will be relevant, but the way that we look to see if societies are progressing will be well-being and how they see their lives. Thank you. It was really great to be here, and congratulations to all of the honorees.
John, that was outstanding. Thank you so much. Jokes aside, it's really information like that, facts, credible information that the news media can report to the news consumers. And so organizations like Gallup are literally invaluable to the world. And so I just want to thank you for the work that your organization does and in providing information that the rest of the world can use to make it hopefully a better place. So again, thank you for making it to Omaha. I'd also like to welcome John's sister. You heard that she keeps her doors unlocked. Nicole Clifton Mills is up here to my left, right above the stairs, sitting with my wife, Stephanie, the equally beautiful ladies. John and I are dining with tonight. So I realize she's your sister, but it's still nice to have better people to dine with than you might otherwise dine with tonight in Omaha alone. Okay, digging a deeper hole. We're going to move on to dinner. Gary, I don't know. Are you still awake back there? Gary, okay, Gary's still good. Want to make sure we don't have to transfer his award to a posthumous award before we get the evening going. If you just wait a few moments, our salads will be coming. There's a couple other people I want to thank real quick. Wade, thanks for manning the slides. Wade is the husband of last year's president of the Omaha Press Club, Daisy Hutzel-Rodman. Daisy, where are you tonight? Oh, in the far corner. Thank you. Daisy Hutzel-Rodman, you probably remember from last year's events. She's a slightly shorter and definitely more female looking than me. So enjoy your dinner. We'll be back with the inductees afterwards. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started with this evening's program. Rana, you ready? Okay. I need to check with Roseanne Shannon. She tends to direct most things. Is it okay to start now, Roseanne? We've got the okay from Roseanne. Excellent. Mike, are you okay? You ready back there? All right. In the bleacher seats, we're back there. Want to make sure I recognize another one of my friends, Angie Anderson Quinn. Hi, Angie. Always fun to see you. You know, I'm starting to question Don Dahl's, the company he keeps, between Angie and the Bogard family. I mean, apparently they'll let anybody in, I understand, but that's pushing it a little bit. Judy, I'll get back to the script. I apologize. Tonight's inductees will be introduced alphabetically. Each will be introduced by a friend or colleague, or at least someone they know. The first honoree is Professor Emeritus of Photojournalism at Creighton University, where he taught for 45 years. Here to introduce the Reverend Don Dahl is his longtime friend from Austin, Texas, Donald Winslow, who's the editor of National Press Photographers Association magazine. Donald?
Thank you. I think he's funny. Many years ago in college at Indiana University, my photojournalism professors hosted an annual weekend intensive workshop for journalism students. One year, the keynote speakers were Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist Eddie Adams, who's known for his iconic yet horrifying picture, Saigon Execution, and Father Don Dahl, a Jesuit priest who was a documentary photojournalist whose groundbreaking work on Native peoples was published in National Geographic magazine. That day, both men made powerful, philosophical, intelligent, and thought-provoking presentations, which had a deep impact on our young minds. One journalist was a war photographer who was somewhat bigger than life, who would go on to document more than 14 major wars around the world. The other journalist was a man of peace, a man of God, who spent much of his life documenting the aftermath of war, the refugees, the maimed, the broken ones, those who had been thrown into the spiritual void. Not only did he use his camera to show the world their plight, but while he was alongside them, he ministered to them. He brought them hope and healing, and he offered a loving hand. Don Dahl and Eddie Adams remained in my life for more than 4 decades, and as my mentor and then as my friends. Eddie died in 2004 of Lou Gehrig's disease. At the conclusion of the college workshop, I approached Don, and I asked him for his business card. I knew I wanted to stay in touch with this compassionate soul that I had just met. His business card said, Father Don Dahl, S.J., priest, professor, photographer. And I said, oh, cool, you've got 3 jobs. And Father Don said, no, I just have 1 job. Those are the 3 ways that the world perceives me. By now, most of you know about Father Don's remarkable lifetime achievements in photojournalism, but did you also know that he has served on the Creighton Campus Planning Committee for more than 40 years? He instigated the founding of the Nebraska Shakespeare Company while he was chairman of the Fine Arts Department. After experiencing his first Macintosh computer, he went to Ohio, took a page designing course, came back and wrote a $125,000 grant, bought 22 Macintoshes, and started the first Creighton Graphic Arts Sequence design class. And for 25 years, he persistently lobbied to get the Fine Arts and Theater building built. Please join me in welcoming to the Omaha Press Club Journalist of Excellence Hall of Fame, the Reverend Don Dahl.
Thank you, Donald, my longtime friend. Thank you for sending your daughter Beth next year, whom I baptized some 18 years ago, to Creighton University next year. We'll take care of her. Don't worry. God has blessed both my life and my work. It has been a sacred journey in the Holy Spirit. As photographer and a Jesuit priest, I have been given the extraordinary opportunity to make photographs of people around the world. On Sioux Indian reservations, in remote tribal villages, and in desolate refugee camps. On the best days, I may have captured the essence of a person in a photograph. It not only has changed my perspective on people and on the world, but has given me an opportunity to use those photographs to communicate those people, who these people are, and how much we are all connected as human beings under one God. So tonight it is humbling not only to be inducted into the Press Club's Hall of Fame, but to join such a prominent group of honorees that are here tonight. And so it is an honor also to join the two Jesuits who are in the Hall of Fame, Father Roswell Williams and Father Lee Lubers. They were both great men who lived their lives of service, both pushed the boundaries of technology to do that. And I also want to recognize Dr. Dave Hammerman, himself an Hall of Fame inductee, for nominating me for this award, and who, over 45 years ago, hired me on a wing and a prayer at the suggestion of Lee Lubers. Today, I'll just as an extra comment, we honored Lee Lubers. It's his birthday today. He would have been 87 or 88 years old. And we installed a sculpture out there at the Scola grounds in his honor. And so I give a little chat out there telling everybody how grateful I am for Lee Lubers, who had the confidence to hire me, who had no experience, to teach photography. My gratitude also goes out to Charles and Mary Hyder and the Hyder family. As holder of the Charles and Mary Hyder Endowed Jesuit Chair, I have been given incredible time and resources to be productive. I can never thank them enough. I used to tell Charlie, there's nothing like resources and time to be creative. And I also want to thank my professional colleagues in this room and my academic colleagues at Creighton University. And I especially want to note Dr. Eileen Worth, the incoming president of the Omaha Press Club Foundation, funding scholarships. That's her passion in journalism. And she has done wonders for our journalism students. She has been both a friend and a collaborator. I'm also grateful to the Society of Jesus, Creighton University, and my Jesuit community for the years of support in my career as a priest photographer. And my sisters and their husbands, Judy and Kurt Schrang and Sue and Harold Carlson, for tolerating the many years of my practicing photographic skills on them and their children, and they rarely saw the results, for I had so little time to make the pictures. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you all, and may God bless you all.
Once again, let's honor Reverend Don Dahl for his achievement. Thank you. And we appreciate your words. They were very nice. Our next inductee, Robert Bob Hoig, an editor and publisher who began his 60-year career in New York, but built his publishing business in the Midlands, is our next honoree. To introduce her father, please welcome second-generation publisher, Andy Hoig. Andy?
Good evening, everyone. All right. Bob Hoig calls himself an accidental journalist. In 1956, Bob found himself walking past East 42nd Street in New York when out of the corner of his eye, he saw a giant world globe revolving in the lobby of what turned out to be the New York Daily News Building. Since Bob needed a job, he asked the guard if they were hiring. The guard gave him directions to the personnel office. That moment of curiosity got him hired as a copy boy. Now Bob says that was the best break he ever got in the writing reporting fields, in which he had no experience except for some youthful poetry. His fate as a publisher was sealed. Now fast forward to 1975, when Bob made a bold decision to start a weekly business newspaper. Many of his peers and colleagues laughed at him, telling him he would be lucky to get out 3 issues. My dad had a plan, and my dad was determined. I now understand where I get my determination gene. His 20-year news career to that point had been mainly as a crime and investigative reporter with large organizations such as UPI, the Miami News, the Omaha World Herald, and the Lincoln Journal. That experience helped lead him to two conclusions guiding the mission of Midland's Business Journal. The Omaha metro area did not need yet another media outlet targeting corruption, vice, greed, and failure. Readers would welcome a fresh weekly business voice spotlighting businesses, their leaders, and the economic facts propelling their success. Over the past 40 years, MBJ has shared thousands of stories about local businesses, as well as recognizing hundreds of business owners and professionals under the age of 40 at the annual 40 Under 40 breakfast. Along the way, Bob has received numerous awards, numerous honors, including being inducted into the Omaha Chamber's Business Hall of Fame, named Omahan of the Year by the Suburban Rotary Club, and he and I became the first father-daughter duo to be honored as one of the faces on the barroom floor by the Omaha Press Club. Bob Hoig, my father, has truly changed the business landscape in our community. So please join me in welcoming to the Omaha Press Club Journalists of Excellence Hall of Fame, my father, Robert Bob Hoig.
Ain't she something? She's the publisher of Metros, I'm sure you know. Our pictures are up on a pillar there, and I'm extremely proud of all she's accomplished. I've got to start with just the story of it impacted our business, but it also set her up. We were putting out a paper called Metro back in the mid-90s, and it wasn't losing money, but it certainly wasn't making anything. So I called her in one day. She'd been our photographer, and I said, Andy, we've got to close it down. She begged me to try to keep it open. So after enough begging, I said, all right, here's the deal. I had a piece of paper and I said, what I'm going to do, Andy, is I'm going to sell it to you for $1. All you have to do is sign here that if you fold it, you will personally refund the subscription. And from then on, it's just been, that's her history. She's done a wonderful job with it. President Todd, Mr. Clifton, all the staff of the press club who did a remarkable job with this banquet. The press club has played a major role in my development as a publisher, not so much as a newsman, but a publisher. I was on the board in 1966 when it was under debate about whether to take the bank up on its offer to have this press club. I had quite a history in being a busboy as a kid, and I knew how hard the restaurant business was. So I voted no, probably the only one that voted no, and sure how wrong I was. Some years later, it was again over at the Press Club bar, where many of my friends from the Herald, I was then a crime reporter. I told them I was going to start a weekly business paper, and that just set the table in a roar. They were hilarious over that. That was Jim Ivey, Larry Wilson, a lot of names that you'd all know. But I said, look, I'll make you guys a deal. Help me get some advertising. Their theory was that there wasn't enough business news in Omaha. And I said, just get me some advertising and let's find out how much business news there is. Well, I'm very happy and proud to say we're going into our 40th year. That really wasn't meant to be a tagline for applause, but I'm humbled following Father Dahl, who's devoted his life to good works, and many of them. Most of my reporting life was devoted to following murderers, hookers, touts, shady people of all kinds. So I am humbled to be following him. But, uh-oh. The last time we were here, Andy and I, they had to get a hook to get me off. It's kind of a foible of us old folks, that once we get going, we just don't know when to stop. But we have a system rigged up now, and Andy is displaying it. Show it to everybody, Andy. And it was her idea. She's a genius. But I thank all of you for the honor. I just am humbled, and thanks again. Omaha's a wonderful community to be in. That's why when I got here after a career everywhere else, they tried to get me back into New York, and I said, Ixnay, I have 3 kids, and I'm not leaving this place.
Congratulations. Need a hand?
No. Okay. I don't think so. Yeah, I would need a hand if I took over that board.
Bob, I particularly appreciate your tennis shoes. I can understand why you have them on at the speed you're moving here. You just get out of the way. He's coming through, Mike.
It's also helpful for gout.
Okay. Gout's not so much that funny, so I probably won't use that in my joke. But nonetheless, Bob Hoig, Hall of Fame. Bob, welcome. Reverend Dahl, where do I go from gout? Do you have a prayer? Anything you can do?
You can pray.
Okay.
I'll help you.
Thank you. We're going to move on. I'm going to get back to the script, Judy. I apologize there. Who was that? All right, I heard that. You're going to be my next joke. Todd, applause. Andy. All right. Next one. An award-winning newspaper reporter who most likely knows more about Warren Buffett than anyone in this room is our next honoree. Everyone can assume who I'm going to name. Steve Jordan has been at the Omaha World-Herald for 48 years, longer than any other journalist there. Is that a positive statement? Is that... Judy, we should have left that out. But so he's been there 2 years longer than I've been alive. His friend, colleague, Mike Kelly, also a Hall of Fame inductee, is here to tell us about Steve. Please welcome Mike Kelly.
Well, thank you very much. You know, it would be easy to misread the program tonight and think it says a 48-year-old veteran of the World Herald, Steve. If you look at the guy, he looks 48. But as Todd said, no, 48-year veteran of one place. Couldn't get a job anywhere else? Steve never actually wrote stories on parchment, but he did start a long time ago. In fact, I brought a couple of things from Steve's early days. This was his camera on the police beat back in the old days.
Oh my God!
And then, and I just happen to have his telephone here. I actually heard him call from the police station one time, and he said, "Hello, sweetheart, get me a rewrite." That's from an old movie. All right. When I arrived, Steve was a 3-year veteran. He took me around on the police station at 11th and Dodge. Of course, over the years, he has won regional and national awards, was recognized in the Columbia Journalism Review. As Todd said, he's covered Warren Buffett for years, writes the weekly Warren Watch column, and wrote a great book, The Oracle and Omaha. Susie Buffett has our honoree's cell number. And one night as Steve was on his way home, she called him to say that her dad was getting married that night. He turned around, back to the office, wrote the story. One of his past editors, Pat Waters, called him the most unegotistical reporter I've ever known. We're certainly not brash and forward, but he is pretty funny. In fact, over the years, I've gotten a lot of laughs at press club shows and other places on lines written by Steve. Thanks a lot. He thought he was funny the year I was supposed to go to Moscow to cover the 1980 Olympics, but America boycotted. So to show you what kind of friend he is, on the day the game started, he took me to lunch at 15th and Farnham at the old Greasy Spoon Olympic Cafe. Nice one. Some say Steve marches to the beat of a different drummer, but you know, he's a heck of a drummer himself, still plays for the Nebraska Wind Symphony, the Megatones, Nebraska Alumni Marching Band. Helen, of course, plays French horn as well. Great to see the whole family here. Steve and I actually performed on stage, not as the Blues Brothers, but as the News Brothers. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome into the Omaha Press Club Journalist of Excellence Hall of Fame, a man of great ethics and professionalism, my buddy, the big fella, my longtime news brother, Mr. Stephen Kenneth Jordan.
Well, thanks very much. I got to introduce Mike a couple of years ago for this thing, and he did a better job than I did, I'll tell you that. I want to thank family and friends that are here. If you get a chance to talk to those 3 tables in the back in a table over here. Go meet those people. They're an interesting group, and they put up with a person who spends a lot of time with the job, probably a little too much. I wanted to give you a brief idea of what newspaper reporters do. A lot of it is routine, but in the meantime, I've gotten to cover some important stories. One night, Captain Bruce Hartford called me at home. I was asleep, to tell me that a bomber had blown up a house and killed a police officer. Later, I got to cover the trial of the 2 guys who were convicted. I talked to some people who came to the emergency room at the old Emmanuel Hospital with injuries from a race riot. I was covering schools when court-ordered busing began at OPS. And as the Soviet Union collapsed, I went with a group of American business leaders, including 2 Nebraskans, to Warsaw, Poland to help jumpstart a free market system. I interviewed families of the people who were killed in Norfolk bank shootings. I met a young Sam Thompson's parents after he and some other Boy Scouts were killed in the tornado at the Little Sioux Scout Ranch. I talked with Enron CEO Ken Lay about how the company had changed since it moved to Houston. He couldn't explain it to me. And I covered Omaha's recovery from the Enron disaster. I've seen, in fact, a rise of a whole new generation of entrepreneurs in Omaha, and they think they can do anything, and they're making it happen today. I've gotten to write about one of the history's most fascinating people, Omaha investor Warren Buffett. With any luck, I'll retire before he does. A few weeks ago, the Press Club Foundation gave out $38,000 in scholarships to upcoming journalists. And naturally, I hope as many of them as possible take a look at a newspaper career. It's a changing business with technology giving people new ways to find out what's going on. The important thing is that the information rooted out and reported by honorable journalists reaches as many people as possible. And when I look online, the best information I find comes from newspaper reporters. If people start reading only half-truths and propaganda that doesn't meet the standards of true journalism, then we're in trouble. Warren Buffett has said he believes newspapers can find an online business model to support excellent journalism. Others have said newspapers can't make that transition. Shortly after Buffett began accumulating his newspaper group, Margaret Sullivan, who was editor of the Buffalo News, wrote, "I don't know whose point of view will prevail when the full story is told, but I know who I'm rooting for." So I would urge you all to root for your local newspaper, and for goodness sakes, buy a subscription and start reading the headlines. You won't know what you're missing until you see it in the paper. Thanks.
I've only gotten to work with Steve a couple of times, but always have found him to be an outstanding, extreme professional and always very kind, and so I can't think of a person more deserving. So once again, let's welcome Steve into the Omaha Press Club Hall of Fame. Our next honoree is someone who I wasn't familiar with, but I couldn't agree more with honoring this person posthumously. To me, maybe an unsung hero, but someone who not only fed me but my children with educational programming. Tonight we proudly honor posthumously the man who started NETV, building it into one of the country's most successful communication systems. Jack McBride died in 2008. His longtime colleague, Lee Rockwell, is here to tell us about this legendary broadcast pioneer. Lee?
Thank you very much. You know, the history of public broadcasting in the United States reflects the leadership of a very select number of individuals who laid the foundation for this vibrant service and shepherded its early growth. And all of us Nebraskans can take pride in knowing that one of the most gifted and influential leaders was one of our own, one of Nebraska's own, one of Omaha's own, Jack McBride. Jack was in the fortunate position to activate only the 7th public television station in this country. And that was only the start for one of public broadcasting's most creative minds. Next came the development of a 9-station statewide interconnected network to bring public television programming to all Nebraska. And Jack had the vision and led the charge for the funding and the building of the Nebraska Educational Telecommunications Center in Lincoln. This dates back to the late 1960s. I think we barely knew what the word telecommunications was at that time, but he did. He had a vision. And at that time, even today, this building stands as one of the most sophisticated and one of the most technologically advanced centers of its kind in the United States. Television programming produced at the center has been honored with National Television Emmy Awards, Peabody Awards, and other distinguished citations. And out of this center emerged many of the earliest educational telecommunications services, which were emulated by stations and networks around the country. One of the great joys of working for and with Jack was participating in the ride as these services were planned and implemented. Jack would say, "Why don't you come on down to the office and let's talk for a while?" And we'd end up in a small conference room with this big whiteboard, and he'd get out the felt tip and he'd start sketching it, and it would go from there. Out of these came many substantial activities. The first interactive computer-based technologies, video disc, interactive cable, a separate cable service allowing the gavel-to-gavel coverage of our Nebraska legislature, satellite interconnection. We were the first public television network to own our own satellite space. We called it NEBSAT. Video information services for the hearing impaired, agricultural producers, telecommunications delivery of graduate level university courses to Nebraska businesses and industries, satellite educational services for Native Americans, for Hispanics, a national educational video marketing and distribution service. Oh, and in his spare time, he personally raised all the funding, community by community, for the basic start of a 9-station public radio network. Educational entities throughout this country and the world recognized Jack's pioneering and innovative spirit, and they sought his input for their own telecommunications needs. 20 different states and about the same number of foreign countries directly benefited from his consulting recommendations, and his legacy can be seen today in public television, public radio, and telecommunications, not just here in Nebraska, but throughout the world. This Hall of Fame recognition by the Omaha Press Club is a most fitting and well-deserved honor. So here to accept the award honoring his father is Jack's son. Please welcome Dave McBride.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by congratulating all of the honorees tonight. I know it would make my father really proud to be part of such a distinguished group of professionals that are part of the Omaha Press Club Hall of Fame. It would mean a great deal to him being from here in Omaha and having graduated just a few blocks up the street here from Creighton. Also would like to thank Lee for his nice comments. It's great to have Lee and Kay here with our family here tonight. My father was often credited for having much of the vision for Nebraska educational telecommunications. A lot of people have a vision for making things better. A lot of people have ideas. For most of us, those visions and ideas wind up being not much more than just dreams. I think for most people to succeed in turning a vision or ideas into significant success, it takes a team effort. It takes collaboration with a lot of other people who share the vision, who refine that vision, and who carry it out. And that was certainly the case with NET. My father was privileged to work with a remarkable team of highly qualified, dedicated professionals. Lee was certainly a key member of that team, and he worked with them for many years. And I know if he were here tonight, he would want to share this recognition and thank them for their contributions in bringing about all the success that has been possible for NET. So on behalf of my father, on behalf of our family, and on behalf of all the people who have been part of the NET team with him, thank you very much for this recognition.
That's one of the magic things about tonight that I always enjoy is the pioneering, the vision. Today we call it innovation, we call it startup. We have maybe a different vocabulary for what's going on today, but your father was equally brave and devoted and targeted and just focused. It's amazing. And so on behalf of the club and the Hall of Fame, I'd like to thank Lee and Kay and your family for joining us tonight once again. Next, we're turning to an iconic farm director who won awards for his agricultural reporting I'll start that again, Judy, I apologize. An iconic farm director who won awards for his agricultural reporting is taking his place posthumously in the Hall of Fame. Two of Arnold Peterson's former WOW radio and TV co-workers, Ann Peterson and Gary Kerr, are ready to tell you more. Here they are.
Hi, everybody. I came to WOW Radio and TV in 1964 as assistant farm director, and I was assistant to Arnold Peterson. He was the farm director, and I had that job for about 5 years. Arnold was great to work for and with. If you screwed up, he let you know about it, but he was a genuinely nice man. We went to plowing contests, and we went to corn picking contests, and we went to corn husker days, and all of these other events that were farm oriented, and everybody knew Arnold, and I mean everybody. And the thing of it was, I didn't just know him, they respected him. Arnold knew agriculture. If there was a rock star, an agricultural rock star, in this area at that time, it was Arnold Peterson. Young people today don't realize how important it is to get out the agricultural message. We had print, of course, but after that, it was just radio and television. I mean, you didn't have the online stuff and the computers and so forth. And Arnold was the radio and TV agricultural messenger in that era. He was also a rock star when it came to the people who employed him at WOW Radio and TV. You know, if you had a product to sell, you wanted to advertise it on a program that Arnold Peterson hosted. And I want to tell you, Arnold Peterson brought in a lot of advertising dollars to radio and TV, WOW Radio and TV. We don't have a lot of time, but I get to tell one story. And it's a story that Arnold would tell himself. You know, before he was farm director, he was assistant farm director to farm director Mel Hansen. And so Mel had the commercials written for him live on the air, on a teleprompter, a storyboard, or something like that. One day, Mel Hansen is gone, so Arnold had to read Mel Hansen's commercial, or the one that he would have read had he been there. And Arnold began, "Hello, I'm Mel Hansen." And then he stopped abruptly and he said, "No, I'm not. I'm Arnold Peterson."
When I was young and growing up in northeast Nebraska, I remember the radio was always on in the morning, tuned to WOW. It didn't matter whether it was my uncle listening to the radio in the barn while he was milking cows, whether it was my grandmother while she was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, or whether it was my family who lived in town listening to the radio before my parents went to work. We were always listening to Arnold. And I thought that was pretty normal because, well, you listen to your cousin if he's on the radio, or you listen to your nephew if he's on the radio. That was just what family did. Well, fast forward a few years, and I found myself sitting next to Arnold, a nervous, young, newly graduated graduate of the University of Nebraska Journalism School, doing the news with Arnold on the noon news. And when I would go out in the afternoon to report on stories, people would say, "Oh, you're on the noon news." And I would stand up a little straighter and say, "Yes, I am." And they said, you anchor with Arnold, don't you?" I went, "Yeah, he's the greatest. I used to be one of his farm families. I love Arnold. Well, everybody loved Arnold. He was a wonderful person. He was a pioneer in the field of agriculture, journalism, and broadcasting, and he was also what we would call today a mentor in the newsroom. Recently, a photo of Arnold was posted on Facebook by one of the employees at WWT. And one of my favorite comments was from photographer Mike Plews, who wrote, "Have to say I miss Arnold, such a gracious man. Talking to him was always a bright spot in my day." But one other posting was just so Arnold that I have to give this story. Ray Matoyer, who lives in Atlanta now, posted that he remembered Arnold one time when he was in the wire room, and some of you can explain to the younger people who are here what the wire room was. But Ray liked to sing, and he was singing a song, and Arnold walked in to grab his wire copy, and he turned to Ray and he said, "Ray, if you're singing on my account, knock it off." And Ray stood up, and then he realized Arnold was just teasing him. Well, tonight we're going to sing for Arnold, and we're not going to knock it off. I am extraordinarily honored to welcome Arnold Peterson into the Hall of Fame, Journalist of Excellence. To accept on his behalf is his daughter, my cousin, Charlotte Peterson Hall.
I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. Thank you, Ann and Gary. You were dear to Dad. Regrettably, my sister Connie wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'll accept this for both of us and our families. I can tell you a little bit. When Dad started out in radio, WW was on Farnham near the Woodman of the World building, and the newsroom was on the first floor. And news came in on teletype machines, UPI and AP, so that's the wire that you're talking about, Ann, and they would rip it off and then it would go for news. And they had a lot of live radio then. I can remember going upstairs and Slim Everhart and his Cowboys were singing. I mean, everything was live then. So it's kind of an exciting time. Dad grew up on a farm in northeast Nebraska, the oldest of 3 boys, and he graduated from the College of Agriculture at UNL. And broadcasting with agriculture was a perfect fit for him. It allowed him to get out and see the farming community around Omaha and Council Bluffs and find out what was working and what wasn't. He enjoyed finding a family and visiting their farm with Bob Mokler, taking pictures. And then they would bring the family in on a Friday, and they would be on a live show, and they would then go out to lunch. And Dad just enjoyed this so much. He just loved to find out what was working on people's farms, how many acres they were farming, what they were lying fallow, what were the crops doing. And then he enjoyed learning about the family. He also treasured the people he worked with at WOW, and many were lifelong friends. After he retired, he started a breakfast group of former co-workers, and they met once a month to catch up and visit. And he personally called each and every one of them to remind them of the meeting. And Dad was very lucky to be a farm director at a time when WW sponsored travel tours in conjunction with Travel and Transport and Mel Hansen. He traveled to all the major countries except China, which he did on his own when he retired. And on the tour, they would always see the regular tourist attractions, but then they went out in the country to glean the things, information from farmers about their agriculture. He captured on camera many of the things he learned. He took rolls and rolls of slide film with him when he went on his trips. And then he came back and shared all this information on radio and TV. And then he also used it in his garden, and he prepared slideshows and gave those to many organizations around the city, always teaching about the places he had been. And her mother accompanied him when it didn't interfere with her teaching year. Dad also did weather for WOW, and during a tornado alert, he could be found on his front porch checking out to see if he could locate the funnel. The rest of us were in the basement where he was supposed to be. And I remember Dad spending the night at the Blackstone Hotel when there was an impending snowstorm. He needed to be able to get to the studio for his early morning radio show. Dad was a great teacher. He was a people person. He was extremely creative and a clear thinker. He was a stickler for correct grammar, and he was an outstanding father and grandfather. He was humbled to be honored with a face on the barroom floor. He would have been so pleased to receive this honor. We thank you for remembering him.
Growing up as a child, I lived close enough to our school that I could walk home for lunch each day. And so, being at the 70s, I would spend the lunch hour on the floor in front of the television watching the only thing that was on, and it was your father, Arnold Peterson, talking about things that I called barrels, gilts, beans, corns, and then I figured out that people get paid for this stuff. And I was at an early age trying to figure out how to make money out of that. I never did figure it out. I went into a different line of work, but I knew your dad from very early, and I feel like I had lunch with him for many years. So thank you for joining us tonight. It is a night where we're honoring a lot of people for firsts in their industries. Tonight, Chuck Roberts, who was an anchor in Omaha at KMTV, when he got the call to move to Atlanta and became the first CNN headline news anchor. Past Omaha Press Club Foundation President John Prescott worked with Chuck at KMTV and was with us tonight to introduce him. John?
Many years ago, back when we were covering the President and Mrs. Coolidge, Chuck Roberts shouted at me across the KMTV newsroom on my 30th birthday. He said, "Prescott, after today, nothing you ever do will be considered cute anymore." At that time, he had no idea we'd be here tonight and I would be introducing him. When Chuck came to KMTV back in the mid-1970s, he became part of a legendary team of photographers and reporters. A number of them are sitting with Chuck up on the terrace right now, probably wondering what horrific tales I will tell in the 90 seconds I have left for the introduction. Well, 90 seconds is not enough for the horrific tales, so just let me say this. From day one, Chuck was a reporter first and an anchorman second. He never shied from the hard work. His self-deprecating sense of humor was a perfect fit for the KMTV newsroom of its day. He fell in love with Omaha, and he is a frequent visitor to his adopted hometown, despite having achieved international fame and fortune for his good work. He's contributed to the Omaha Press Club show whenever we've asked him to do so. He's a face on the barroom floor here. He has conducted seminars at the club for younger journalists and students when he could take time away from his duties at CNN, where he blazed new trails in broadcast news. He's a friend of journalism, of this community, of this club, and he's been a great friend to me for more than 40 years. Please join me in welcoming to the Omaha Press Club Journalists of Excellence Hall of Fame, live from Atlanta, Chuck Roberts.
It's great to be back. John reminded me that this probably would be my last hurrah. That's why he got me here. I sort of pictured a string quartet playing Nearer My God to Thee when I got here. Actually, my first meal in Omaha in 1975 was in this very room. Ninette Beaver and Mark Gautier took me to lunch right here. And the rest is history. Here I am, older and whiter than I was back then. I want to dedicate this, though, to my friends at table number 16. And I must tell you, in all honesty, that I wouldn't be here without their guidance, their leadership, their friendship, and all they have meant to me. So I want to devote a little bit of time to the likes of Roseanne Shannon. She and I covered a 4-alarm fire. That was my first story in Omaha, at a time when she herself was a 4-alarm fire. I want to tell you, she blew right past the police barricades and bulled her way up to the assistant fire chief for an interview. She was something to behold back then and still is today. To Maylie Mason. Maylie could charm even the most hostile, scared, and grieving interview subjects into saying, "Yeah, okay, I'll talk to you." And those same subjects would give me no time of day at all. To Arlo Grafton, who led stand-ups 1-on-1. If my first one didn't work, he would look out from behind the viewfinder and say, "Do it again. I'm not sure I had you in frame." What he meant to say was, "It sucked. Do it again." His guiding principle was, if at first you don't succeed, try doing what your cameraman told you to do the first time. To Carrie Schultz, who is not here, Carrie was perpetual motion. She had the finest work ethic I've ever seen. She had a phone in each ear. She could get any interview. She could talk anybody into talking to her, and it was a joy to work with her. To Gary Williams, who on my first day took me down to City Hall and introduced me all around. To Ed Zorinsky, I got to meet the mayor of Omaha on my first day here because of Gary Williams. Gary, thank you for your friendships and for all the beers you bought me at the Antenna Lounge. And to John Prescott, John, my geriatric friend, you kept it all in perspective. No event was without irony to John Prescott. He is a great writer and a great storyteller and a great friend to everyone in this room. This is huge. Thank you so much.
Chuck, thanks for joining us tonight. I have to agree with you. I've had the pleasure of meeting most of the gentlemen you named, John Prescott, Arlo Grafton, Gary Williams, and all I could add to that is not only are these great men, but their wives are probably greater than they are for putting up with them for so many years. So to the ladies at table 16, which were not mentioned. And also to Chuck, welcome to the Hall of Fame. Gary, I know you're probably thinking, were you actually nominated this year? Is Gary still here? Oh yeah, there he is, okay. I checked the award. That last award does have Saddlemeyer written on it, so it is no fluke. It is no joke. You are, in fact, being inducted tonight. Against several protests, tonight is the night. Our final honoree tonight is a Nebraska radio legend who continues to explore issues of interest every day on KFAB. Gary Saddlemeyer will be introduced by Ed May Jr. of the May Broadcasting family, former longtime owners of KFAB. Welcome to the podium, Ed.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure and honor for me to present Gary Saddlemeyer for the Hall of Fame. We've known each other a long, long time, both as friends and professionally when my family was associated with KFAB. Gary's from Minnesota, and he attended Brown Institute in Minneapolis. He then moved to Grand Island to work at KRGI. And when we were preparing for this, he said, "This is how I got my job at KRGI." The general manager had fired a person, didn't have a backup, was in a panic, needed a warm body, and Gary was it. Gary did well there, and then in 1976, he took a nighttime announcer position at KFAB, and he's still there 38 years later. Over that period of time, Gary's done a variety of things for KFAB, including working on Husker broadcasts as a sideline reporter from 1980 through 1995. He's done the morning show since the 1990s, and is also the program director. He's also done many, many other things. We all know that to be in a high-profile position at the same radio station for that length of time means that you're talented and you're popular. Recently, I talked to some of Gary's co-workers who see him in action on a daily basis, and here are a few of their comments. He's eminently fair when it comes to the issues. Gary has never colored the facts to support his view. He's smart, naturally funny, well-read, imaginative, has a gifted voice, but zero pretense. Gary's greatest asset is his authenticity. What you see is what you get. Gary, you've contributed a great deal to Omaha and has had a positive influence on countless people over the years. You are a true professional that represent yourself, your station, and the industry extremely well. It's obvious you are very deserving of this honor. Please welcome to the Omaha Press Club Journalists of Excellence Hall of Fame, Gary Saddlemeyer.
Thank you, Ed.
Before I get started, Todd, you have another insult, I think, before. Okay. No. Thank you very much, everyone. The May family owned KFAB radio for, I should have asked you, Ed, part of the prep, but for many, many, many years. When I started here, and for many years before that, and for many years after that. And so this connection is very special to me. And Ed and Carrie, I appreciate you being here. And there's a man with us tonight, and he's at the far end of the room. I'd like Jack Payne to stand up and just wave quickly. Thank you, Jack. I see this as not really a journalism award for me. And the reason I say that is because what I do on a daily basis isn't, strictly speaking, journalism. I do opinion radio. I have done reporting before, and news and sports in my career. But I see this as a legacy that was handed to me by Lyle Bremser and Ken Hedrick and Walt Kavanaugh. And I remember something Walt said one time, and it wasn't particularly dramatic. We were having a casual conversation. I was just a young guy, and Walt was Walt. But I remember he said something one time. He said, we always want to remember to be respectful of the people we're talking to and the people we're talking about. He understood the essence of journalism. And I appreciated that. It's funny, the little things that stick with you, you know, that mentors mention along the way. And that always stuck with me. So to the Omaha Press Club Selection Committee, thank you. You've clearly made an error, but I do appreciate it very much. And to all of you for being here, and to my dear wife, Roseanne, for putting up with it for all these years. And of course, that could be coming to an end. You never know. But no. Thank you, baby. I appreciate it. And to everyone here, thank you so much. And as my friend Chuck Roberts says, yes, this is huge. Thank you.
Jokes aside, I do want to thank Gary for keeping radio news talk alive in Omaha. Probably everybody in this room starts their day, whether they're driving or showering or getting ready in the morning, staying informed of be it a traffic problem or the news that's occurred while we were sleeping. So I would probably disagree with you that it's not journalism, Gary. We start our days with the news you provide us, and so I thank you and welcome you to the Hall of Fame. And I want to congratulate all of our honorees tonight. We're getting to that point in the night where we're going to wind up with a few thank yous and then let everyone return to the bar. We are so proud to welcome you all to the Omaha Hall of Fame, Journalists of Excellence for the Omaha Press Club. The video has been recorded by Mike Wallace right here, who's with KMTV, so we thank Mike Wallace, Chris Ehring at KMTV, and everyone for donating your time and helping us out. This video will be on YouTube, so check your newsletter if you're a member. But if you'd like to become a member, there are some pamphlets by the elevator on your way out the door. I also need to thank Eric Stokes, who's with The Reader. He put together the video montage you saw during the cocktail hour and during dinner of our inductees tonight. As I mentioned earlier, well, go ahead and let's give. I don't know if Eric's even here, but it was kind of him to do that work, and Mike as well. Wade Rodman, who helped earlier with the AV. We want to thank him. I don't even know where Wade is. I thought I should pause and thank the heating and cooling guys for making sure that we lost any weight we put on while we were here tonight. I don't know if it was warm for you all, but I was a little warm. I'm almost done. I think finally all I need to do is thank Judy Horan one more time for putting together probably one of the best events she's ever done. With the exception of an error in who you chose to MC the event, I thought it was an outstanding event. Thank you, Judy. I apologize to all of you who didn't enjoy my jokes, but I do encourage you to join us at the bar, and the bar will remain open until the last face on the barroom floor is scraped up and removed. So have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.